everybody.
Should this be, oh, thank you very much. So first, thanks again for sticking around. I was very honored when David asked me to come and be the kind of closing speaker. So I'm representing two different groups here. I've been a general partner at Foundation Capital for the last 17 years. And I'm also a what's called VC in residence, kind of like an entrepreneur in residence, but a VC in residence, at a really cool company called Mach 49, which is kind of like a Y Combinator for the Global 1000. So I'm going to talk about both of those things. But first, I want to start maybe a little bit with my own journey that maybe kind of illustrates a little bit of the journey in the Valley in general. So I came here 35 years ago. I grew up in Virginia and met a girl, followed her out here, married her 29 years ago. And but back in the day when we were dating, we used to have these parties at our house, actually at her parents' house, because her parents were the only one we knew that had a swimming pool and a hot tub. So it was a very popular destination for houses, for these parties. We actually got written up in Fortune for one of them. And at one of these parties, I met this guy. He was the best friend of my best friend at SRI, where I was working at the time. And this guy seemed like a good guy, kind of stayed in touch, and then later he came up with this idea to find errors in software. And that became known as a product called Purify. And that product actually turned out to be a once-a-generation innovation. The product worked 100 times faster than the existing technology. His name was Reed Hastings, and so when we started this company at that time, you know, it was kind of like a bunch of people like nobody knew anybody. And then time went by, and we did the company went public. I ended up being worth about $2 or $3 billion, so it was awesome. And then I went on to another company that I'll talk about in a moment, Khanna Communications, that I thought was going to be really cool. And actually turned out to be great. A guy named Mark Ganey, Michael Horvath. Michael was a professor here at Stanford at the time. And they had a new way to answer email in high volume, which in 1997, 98, that was a pretty good idea. So Benchmark had just invested. Andy Ratcliffe had asked me to go and interview to run the go-to-market for that company. And so I went, I did that. And I joined the company when it had just done its Series B round, to Duncan's point earlier about how inflation has kicked in around this. The Series B round for Khanna Communications was done at $13 million post, just to give you a flavor for that. And that was in December of 1997. That's when I got recruited. By September of 99, we'd taken the company public, and by then I had 500 people. I was running the worldwide go-to-market, and by February of 2000, our stock had hit $9 billion market cap. So we've gone up some infinite number of X's during that time period. Now, the fact is, we actually went way, way down after that, like a lot of things did in 2000. But I had a fantastic experience here. Moving out here, I got to be part of two startups. They both worked out really well. I got to make lifelong friends that I've been able to work with in a bunch of ways since then. Fortunately for Foundation ended up funding Netflix back in 1998. And we actually owned 11.1% of Netflix for about $15 million. If you want to do the math on that, it's a pretty good outcome. And then after I had finished up with Pure, I'm mixing stories around a little bit. My wife and I, we got to take a sabbatical, so we got to take 8 months off and travel around the world. So I looked like Barry Gibb from the Bee Gees if he had dark hair, so that was kind of back in the day. And then when I got back, that's when I told you that story about Andy Ratcliffe and saying, hey, I want you to go start this Khanna Communications thing. So like I said, I had a great run. I then ended up having something unusual happen. I became the president of the Western Association of Venture Capitalists. It's kind of a long story, but I'll kind of keep it short. And while I was in that role, I had an opportunity to do something I never thought I'd get to do, which is I produced a movie.
You have to be a street fighter.
We didn't know what we were doing.
Silicon Valley, technical breakthrough.
$100,000.
$100 billion.
Intel,
Apple,
Genentech,
Cisco, good markets,
great
companies,
growing companies.
guys, the rest is history.
The company was started with $250, and so we never had any money. We had to be great.
These are very fragile companies with a lot of things missing.
Any new business seldom does what's written in the business plan.
The risks were just enormous.
You could walk down the street in 1976 and talk to 100 people and say, would you like a personal computer? And they'd go, well, what's that?
Stubbs and Wozniak came up to see me, and they were very unappealing.
They were bearded, they didn't smell good, they dressed funny. But Wozniak designed a really wonderful computer.
I was convinced it was a big market just embryonically beginning.
When you see it, you know it. It's just that it just goes right through your bones.
At the time we started Genentech, there was no such thing as genetic engineering. I said, what if God or Darwin won't let us make a new life form? But we had our breakthrough.
It was a new idea, but it was a good one. If they hadn't stayed together, probably there'd be no Silicon and Silicon Valley.
Well, isn't it great if you can make money and change the world for the better at the same time?
So when I was fortunate enough to get to do this film, it was really to chronicle what I had seen personally. I came from a small town in Virginia. I'd never been exposed to technology, certainly not the semiconductor industry and so forth. And I was just inspired by all the people I met out here. And I just thought it would be great if there was a way to be able to chronicle that. So the way I think about that is I was trying to find a way to document the dreamers. These were the original people that were dreaming up these new industries in the Silicon Valley. Just bookmark that for a second, because that will become more important as we go to the next phase. Sorry about that. So as we chronicled with the film, we really saw this just explosion of activity. I mean, other than maybe Ferdinand and Isabella, 1492, what's happened over the last 50, 60 years in the Silicon Valley might be the greatest creation of wealth in human history. But not just the greatest creation of wealth, the greatest creation of innovation. Like, just look at the hundreds of things that we've seen happen come out of all this great entrepreneurial activity, whether it be the semiconductor or the mobile phone or the DVD or any number of other things. And now we're getting into a place where tech has gone into the mainstream. And I'll make another reference to that here in a moment. I created this model about 20 years ago when I was trying to explain to people back where I grew up. I would go back and give talks at my college about what it was like to work in the Silicon Valley, and I use this kind of notion of a flower petal model to say that it's really an integration of all these different pieces, and people behave a little bit differently here. They'll work for stock, they'll work at higher risk type of entities, they'll fail more often, they'll fail faster, and there's a tolerance for that kind of thing because we're all looking for the big success. And when I built this model, the kind of the entrepreneur in the center that I had in mind was Reed Hastings, but not the Reed Hastings at Netflix, but the Reed Hastings from Pure Software, because Netflix hadn't happened yet. I sometimes spend time on this, particularly when we talk to people in outside of the U.S. now, because it kind of walk them through, you know, these are some of the things that are just happening here, and it really dovetails, I think, nicely into some of the stuff that Duncan was talking about. Some of these things have really changed over the last, say, 20, 30 years. This is what we saw back in the 80s and the 90s, and then now we're seeing kind of a different set of behaviors. So you have to be adaptable. You have to kind of like roll with the changes, as it were, in terms of what's happening within the marketplaces. These are all the different pieces of it. Many of these things are things that you guys would know. And then some of the pieces that come out. Sometimes I give a seminar that goes on for 3 hours, and we go through every one of these terms in excruciating detail, but we'll skip that for today, because that's not the point. So now, switching gears over, as I said, I was lucky enough to join Foundation Capital back in 2001 is when I joined. Foundation's an interesting company. It was part of an older venture firm called Merrill, Pickard, Anderson, and Iyer. Back in the 1995, that firm split into two pieces. It became Benchmark Capital and Foundation Capital. It's kind of the origin of that. For me, I'd spent my whole operating career working for the Benchmark guys, and then I was fortunate enough to have a chance to go over to Foundation. So the way I like to describe Foundation is that we've taken $3 billion of investor capital, and we've turned it into $300 billion in outcomes. So that's been pretty good. And yet, we're not the best. Like, there are a bunch of other folks that have done even better than that. But we're very proud of what we've been able to do. Historically, we've had some great companies. Financial Engines is actually the first SaaS company that I've known about, or I remember knowing about. We originated the company out of Stanford here, Nobel Prize winning Bill Sharp and his team. Sunrun, my partner Steve Asalo, put $4 million in for 35% of the company at the depths of the last economic crisis. The company just hit $2 billion in market cap this week. Really, really fun company. And a whole bunch of other things we've done over time. this is what we're doing now. So I wanted to give you guys kind of like a quick snapshot. This is like a flash sort of seeing or view into what's going on in today's venture capital world. And it's going pretty well. We're doing well. A lot of other firms are doing well. We're still in this kind of upcycle. And in this case, we got really, really fortunate in terms of some of the things that have happened for us. So what are we working on? We're working in all these areas you've been hearing about, in AI and ML, security, consumer marketplaces, and then all these other different vectors that we spend time on from that perspective. I'm going to take a moment to actually highlight some of the really cool companies that have emerged just in the last few years. So this is a company, how many of you have heard of States Title? I'll be honest here. It's a pretty quiet company. Oh, very good. Somebody really proud that they were the one that did it, which is great because you're very smart. You should follow that person's money because this is going to be phenomenal. So this is a guy named Max Simkoff. He sold a company, made some money, went out to buy a house, kind of had his Reed Hastings Netflix moment, saw that little line on there that said title insurance, $15,000 in 3 weeks, figured it out. And he's like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, somebody ought to fix that. So he decided that should be him. And over the last 2 years, Max is quietly, we were the only investor in the company. We did the whole Series A, my partner Charles Moldau. And he quietly worked in our offices up in San Francisco and quietly incorporated in 50 states and got licensed as the first automated title insurance company. So he took what used to take $15,000 in 3 weeks, and it now takes $300 and 30 milliseconds to do title insurance. So that sound you hear is this teetering pile of $100 billion of market cap of these companies that have ignored technology and in fact have done a lot of things to try to circumvent innovation over a period of time. And hopefully soon they'll get their just desserts. But the really cool thing that happened here is that one of those companies woke up early, Lennar. They're the number 6 player in this space, number 1 home builder. And they said, you know what, we'd rather join you than fight you. So they took their $200 million business and they gave it to Max. Like, who's ever heard of such a thing? With a large company. They gave it to him. They said, we just want 33% of the combined company back, and then we want you to run it. And so that's what they did. So this company just got recapitalized at $500 million. It's the fastest fintech company ever to $200 million in revenue, and it got it all in one single check. So Max is on his way. For any millennials in the crowd, hopefully in the future, you'll be getting your title insurance a lot smarter way than most of the rest of us did, and it'll be a heck of a lot cheaper. HealthIQ, this was a much better known company. How many people know HealthIQ? Okay, so much quicker this time because I'm gonna run out of time. Munjal Shah, he did Light.com. I love Munjal, I wish he was here. I think he would laugh if I described it this way, but he did Light.com, sold it to Google, and literally got kind of fat and happy, got sort of round. And went to the doctor. Doctor said, hey, you're 38 years old and you're much older than that in your body. You need to do something about it. So first he started thinking, I want to do a health app. And we said, well, we love you, but we don't want to do a health app. And then he said, I want to take the health app and apply it to data science. We said, well, that sounds more interesting. And then he said, I want to take this health app, apply it to data science, and then I'm going to go disrupt the entire life insurance industry. Because I'm going to find a way to find the healthiest people in society and offer them life insurance at 40% off. And that's what he did. So that's what HealthIQ is. And they're now going through and finishing up the financing that's a very swanky one for them. And then I'm going to close it with this, because this is sort of the granddaddy of them all. This is a company called Cerebras. Anybody know Cerebras? Okay, any semiconductor physics folks in here? So Cerebras has created a technology that will allow you to run AI and ML applications 1,000 times faster than the existing chipsets that are in existence today. It was founded by a group of people who are my age or older. I'm 58. They're PhDs in semiconductor physics, led by a phenomenal guy named Andrew Feldman. Andrew grew up here on the Stanford campus. He gives this amazing talk. He was the ball boy for his father's foursome in tennis. And there were 6 players that rotated through it, and 4 of the 6 players had won the Nobel Prize. So that's how he grew up. And so he has very high aspirations. This is a company that we originated the company in our offices about 30 months ago at about 35 pre, and they just got their last round done at 1.6 billion. So there's a lot of good stuff that's happening in the Silicon Valley today, that's happening in venture today. I'm bragging about my firm, but I could brag about 10 others that you guys have heard about, and you've met some of the people here. Bullpen's doing some phenomenal work, and other folks like that. But I'm going to cap it off with this. I started off talking about the dreamers and the 50 years of history. So the thing about the dreamers is that they were working on marketplaces that by definition were very, very small, meaning in many cases they didn't exist, right? I mean, there was no marketplace for video games until Atari, because it didn't exist, and so forth, and Genentech and so on. So what I've seen in my lifetime, in my professional lifetime here in the Silicon Valley, is a transition from the dreamers to the disruptors. So the Huffington Post had me write this piece about 4 years ago, and it's really about the transition in venture from looking for the next Herb Boyer for Genentech, and instead looking for the Travises and the Chesneys and the others for the large disruptive companies. And it's pretty simple why. It's all the stuff Duncan just talked about. There's more capital, and those are much, much larger markets. So we're entering in the middle of, in fact, a new era at some level in the Silicon Valley, and you guys are going to get to be part of that. And as I say here, this just sort of like illustrates that point a little bit further. And now this is sort of the future, is the present and the future. And I think we're just going to see more and more of these things, and we're going to see things moving even more quickly. So that's my 50 years in 15 minutes, and I'm going to stick around for a little bit, and I'm happy to answer questions, but thanks very much, David and the F50 team, for giving me an opportunity to speak to you all today. Thank you.